Greetings and welcome to the Comics Coffee Metal Podcast. I'm your host, Don Cardenas, and today I am welcoming back a very long overdue returning guest, my bud and the mastermind behind the non-human audio guitar pedal, or just whatever pedal you want to use, instrument you want to use it on, pedal brand, Dave Jordan. Dave, welcome back to the show.
Hey, I feel weird being called a mastermind, but thank you.
Well,
Thank you for having me back.
seeing the response people have to the pedals you've been making and all that, I feel like mastermind is kind of apt. People seem to really have a strong love for the pedals. You know, and I am a happy non-human audio owner myself.
It's
My
true.
own
One of the
cave
first.
bear.
One of the
Yeah,
first. I
and
guess my uh hesitation to like accept that kind of word, I think it implies some kind of like grand plan,
mm-hmm.
and I really just fell into it. Like I was not planning on it becoming what it became. So uh accepting the mastermind title feels a little weird. Um,
Fair. That
it
that
makes
that
me
that
it
that's
makes me
fair.
seem like I had this like big grand scheme, and
Well,
was not the
last
case.
time you're on the show, you were one of my very first guests, and it's been 4 years almost. And at that time, we were talking about the comic work you were doing and some design work and stuff like that. And it's been a very interesting time in between for both of us. Lots of
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
Um, so we have a lot to catch up on. Especially, I wanted to hear all about the beginnings of non-human audio and how things went with that, and maybe poke at you about comic stuff. But
yeah, yeah. Of course.
this is Comics Coffee Metal, so I gotta ask Dave, Comics Coffee Metal, what have you been digging right now?
Um, well, I'm pretty sure last time my answer for coffee was that I get my beans from a local roaster called Michael Thomas
Mm-hmm.
Coffee, which I still do. Um, which I feel a little bad about because like I do have a friend that owns a rival coffee place to Michael Thomas, but I still go to Michael Thomas because I their beans are good and they're not too expensive, and actually in recent years they have also been really good at inclusive hiring, which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
I feel like every time I go in there, there's somebody working that wouldn't self-identify in any sort of like normative way, um, which I really appreciate
No,
as
yeah, yeah.
a supporter of the business. Like I really appreciate that like hiring tactic or whatever you want to call it. But it makes me feel good about supporting them.
That's good.
Um,
That's great.
so that's coffee checked off the list.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Um,
coffee's been an interesting one. Uh, I'm still banging the rootless drum. I still love my damn fine. Though we do have some times in between where I order something different or I get something new to try. And lately, this past week, I've been drinking Two Brothers roasters. They're from Illinois, I believe. They're
okay.
fairly big, I think, at this point. I think they're in Target, so it's like but they have a morning drive blend that I've been enjoying and not enjoying at the same time. It's a
Okay.
very bright. And I'm not really, I think when we last time we spoke, I think I was more leaning towards a
Yeah.
darker roast and all that. And I kind of settle into like medium roast and all that. And I've been experimenting with more citrusy, brighter stuff. And it's very I don't know, it's like one cup I'll have, I'm like, this is great. Next cup I'll have, I'm like, this is too much.
Mm.
So
I
but,
I tend
yeah.
to stick with medium roast. The lighter roast stuff I find kind of falls in my opinion kind of falls in line with yours, where it's like when it's real fresh and real hot, you're like, oh, this is great. But the moment it actually kind of starts to mellow out and open up, I
Yeah.
kind of get to like territory with it.
Yeah.
Funny
Yeah.
thing about rootless though, oh, you can hear my cat probably. Shut up, get out of
Well,
here.
cats are welcome to make an appearance on the show. All animals
um,
are welcome.
so funny thing about rootless, Jono, is that
Yeah,
how you pronounce his name?
yeah,
His
I tell yeah,
brother, his brother Nick runs a pedal company.
yeah,
Yeah, and
one
I'm like buds with Nick now, which
yeah,
is weird.
I like I've heard him say it, but it's from that thing you do, but I
It's
don't know if it
Wonder,
is it's
Wonder
Oneater?
effects. Yeah,
Okay. Not Wonder, okay, it's Oneater pedals. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's and he's making guitars now too, I think,
Yes, he is. Yeah,
Yeah, and,
it's Nick's a funny guy, but he's one of those guys that like we only know each other from the internet,
mhm,
you know. Um, but like it's not dissimilar from comics, and I think some of that is a lot of that we all kind of come from a punk rock background in some way, or a lot of us do, not all of us, but
mhm.
um, so there's kind of like an instant camaraderie there, where like as soon as you kind of like know that this person is one of your people,
Yeah,
it's like you're buds. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Um, but let's see, metal. Um, one of my favorites, and I don't remember if this record came out like last year or maybe even the year before, but the last Phobophilic record is really fantastic. It's called Enveloping Absurdity, but it's just, you know, it's semi melodic but like super just like heavy death metal. In that way it's like not it's not gothy, but it has that like weight to it, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Um,
Well, yeah, I get that.
yeah, so that's been one of my favorites. Basically since I heard it. Um, recently, I've been listening to the latest Escuela Grind EP,
Okay.
um, which is just called like death metal.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's like spelled out with like multiple letters for
Yeah,
each.
yeah. No, I saw that pop up. I haven't gotten to it yet, but yeah, I'm familiar with them.
Yeah,
Um,
and that one's super fun. Oh, jeez. Now my dog's here. Hold on. Let me see if I can get him. There. No,
all right.
hop up, dummy. Come on. There you go. Okay.
Aw, that's a good doggy.
Oh, he smells so bad.
Is it Frito
Um,
Toes?
but for the video people, is my dog.
Yes, Dave is holding up his very adorable dog. Um, does the
Um,
doggy have the Frito Toes? Is that what's going on right now?
does he have the
Smelly
what?
toes? The Frito Toes?
The Frito toes. What does
Like
that
the
mean?
Frito chips? No, you ever heard
No.
when their toes smell, they smell like corn chips, essentially?
Oh, I don't know. His breath smells so bad that I never
Oh,
get close
okay.
to his feet.
Oh, okay. I mean, we've just long called it Frito Toes. I don't know. Maybe it's just because our dogs always had smelly feet.
Yeah.
Best as we tried.
Here, hold on one second. Get out of here. Go on.
So, no, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, metal's been really good lately, and I keep finding myself going down like these rabbit holes. Um, like I don't know where you lie with this whole like Static X reunion thing they've been doing the past couple years, where they've had the guy kind of dress up.
Right.
Um,
I'm aware of that.
yeah,
Um, I
I know
was
that
never a
I don't
stack.
think Static X was really one of your bands at any
Right,
point.
exactly. So like
Yeah,
I'm aware of that, but I don't really like it's
yeah.
I'm
I
pretty
mean,
sure that tours come through town, but it's
yeah,
not something I've ever
yeah.
really.
It's coming by us next month, and I kind of want to see it because they're coming with Seven Dust, and I'm like I haven't seen either of these bands live, and that would be nice to see. But I've kind of like they just had a second volume of their Project Regeneration, which is like they took a bunch of older demos, and it's the rest of the original band working on the music and all that,
Right.
and it's this one and the first Project Regeneration. They're actually really good Static X albums,
Oh, fair enough.
and as weird as the whole approach seemed when they first started doing it, like over the past couple of years, seeing live videos and seeing people talk about the show and all that, it seems to be very much like it's being done right, like as a tribute to the guy, and not just. I'm sure there has to be some sort of financial incentive to do something, but also like they're trying to do it right as best you can.
Yeah.
But that came out recently, and I've been jamming that. But I didn't something that I came across that I wasn't really aware of was Mike Mangini was the drummer of Dream Theater for what 12 years or so,
Yeah.
and he recently got left or asked to leave or whatever. So
Yeah.
Mike Portnoy
Portnoy's
could come
back,
back,
whatever.
whatever. Okay,
Yeah.
fine, whatever. I like Dream Theater well enough. Um, but he had an album come out last year, like an original album come out last year with guitar by Gus G, who's like played with like Ozzy and Firewind, and the vocals were by the someone I didn't know who did vocals. I just knew them as a guitar player, but Jen Majura, like she's been in a bunch of metal bands. She was like most recently like she was in Evanescence for a few years,
Oh, okay.
which was hilarious because she's like a killer guitar player, and like like they did like next to nothing with guitars in that time she was in there.
Right.
But she's like doing
Huh.
the vocals on it, so it's like a really solid, like straightforward metal album. But it's like surprisingly like, oh wow, this is really solid and good, and I had no idea this thing even came out. And like whatever, and so
Interesting.
and I'm mentioning this not because I don't think Dave's going to enjoy these. I don't think they're really Dave's cup of teas, but I haven't really been
Well,
having an opportunity to like pop in my recommendations for anybody, what I've been listening to. So Dave's being gracious and letting me hone in on the interview a little bit to like drop some of these things I've been listening to.
I mean,
And
look,
as always, go listen to Orbit Culture, everybody. They rule. They just got signed to Century Media Records. They're gonna rule the metal landscape. Before,
good music's good
yeah,
music, and taste is
yeah,
taste, and my tastes
yeah,
do tend to skew a bit heavier, and
yeah.
darker, but
And
like, you know,
yeah, and I've definitely opened up my ears a lot more to like some more of the deathy stuff and more of the black metal type stuff and all that,
hmm
and even some hardcore stuff. Like I had Nelson Blake on a couple episodes ago, and besides being a fantastic artist, he's in like a thrashy hardcore band called like Locked in a Vacancy, and their EP was really good. And it's not really
Oh,
something
I
I
didn't
would have
know he
listened
was in
to if
that
he was.
band, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
he was in it for a few years in the early 2000s, and then they had like a time in between, and then they started doing some reunion shows in the 2010s and all that, and he was kind of popping in and out. And now, yeah, they just did an EP. They're getting ready to do a whole album, and it's really good. It's really, really
Nice.
good. And it was a big long episode of me and Nelson just kind of nerding out about guitars and stuff. But
Yeah,
um, so but yeah, my tastes have definitely grown a bit. So and all that. But yeah, I think I have to like just toss a few of these things out there just because you know I'm I do my best to try to like listen to everything I can. Like if
sure.
usually if a guest recommends a band and I'd never heard of them, which is quite often because there's just so many bands out there these days, I do my best to give them a listen and check them out. Because my previous guest, Scott Brian Wilson, we started talking about Dungeon Synth, and Dungeon
Mhm.
Synth wasn't something I had listened to in a few years, but I really liked it when I did. And so, like, he just sent me a whole list of bands and stuff to go check out. And there's a couple people who heard the show were sending me bands like, "Oh, go check them out too." I'm like, "Well, shit, I got a
Right.
whole like playlist now for all this." But
You
and
know,
me kind of
you mentioned like hardcore bands. There's an interesting thing in hardcore now, which might actually kind of perk your ear up a little bit, and is that like there are younger bands now that are incorporating more legitimate new metal influence
yeah, yeah,
into just what they do because they didn't grow up with the like purist attitude of like,
hmm
hardcore is this. They
yeah,
grew up listening to hardcore, but listening to Slipknot and listening
hmm
to Mudvayne or Static X or whatever. And some of those bands are actually doing pretty interesting things, kind of like melding the styles together in a
yeah,
totally non-ironic way.
hmm
Um, it not being a huge new metal fan, it doesn't necessarily like interest me that much, except for from like a cultural perspective of like it's really
hmm
interesting that like this is where these kids who are 20 years younger than me now are
yeah.
like pushing the genre in different directions.
Yeah, yeah. They grew up with new metal already being. a thing. By the time they were teenagers, new metal was 15, 20 years old,
Yeah.
you know? And so it was already like thrash to us,
Mhm.
you know?
Right. Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense. And that's what I love because, I was never like a huge new metal guy. I like a few bands who would fall
Sure.
under that category or whatever. I think a lot of it was crap, but I also think a lot of thrash bands from the 80s are crap. Just because they were fast and thrashing it doesn't mean they were good. There's a lot of great ones for sure. But like not every musical uh, not every time a new metal music subgenre was formed was it all gold. you know
Absolutely.
um
I mean, you could say
so
that about literally every genre that's ever existed.
exactly, exactly, exactly. And I do like that. I think I've expanded my taste enough to where I can listen to something that's harsh and dissonant and just not pleasant, but I can catch the vibe of it. I can catch the mood of it, and then I can switch to something that's incredibly produced, incredibly quantized, and whatever. But I still can appreciate it because it's doing a different thing. But it's all metal, I just love metal. That's why I love comics because it can all just be whatever the fuck we want it to be. you know,
Yeah,
we can
for
we
sure.
can bring whatever influences we want into these things, and it's still going to be metal. It's still going to be comics
Hmm.
because that's how great those things are. You
Yeah.
know, so
Well,
so
on that
yeah,
note,
I'm definitely pleased about that.
my comics, aside from my regular um, monthlies,
Yeah.
I'm a person that, and I'm sure you know this to some extent because I'm sure we've talked about it, but I'm a person that like I like to embark on like projects.
Hmm.
In that, like a couple years ago, I sat down and reread every Ed Brubaker book, like every Ed Brubaker book, except for
Yeah,
X Men
yeah.
because I never liked his X Men. But so what I started doing like a couple months ago was I started reading Hellblazer because I had read some here and there.
Hmm.
My ex-wife was really into it. So there was some in the house, there were some stories I was familiar with, but I'd never like read Hellblazer.
Yeah.
And I just had one of those moments where I was like, why haven't I done this? This seems like something that I would be really into, and I just
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
have. And so I literally like was like, all right, starting issue 1, I'm going to read Hellblazer. And
All
I'm
right.
on issue like 250 now, I think.
You said two, and I'm like, I thought you were making a joke. Like
I've made it
250. I'm like,
two
okay, okay,
issues. No, and so yeah, I think if I'm not at 250, I'm like right around 250,
okay.
and so that's what I've really been reading. I mean, that's been the focus of my reading for months.
And
Is just
is it something that like you as a is it something right now since reading that many issues as a whole you're like, oh, I really dig this, or is it like there's definitely some peaks and valleys?
I'd say both actually,
Okay.
in an interesting way. There are chunks of it where as I was reading, I was like, I can't believe I've never read this before. Like this is so good and so up my alley, and like, but you know, being a comic book of a bygone era, really, the writers change and the artists change and
Yeah.
the viewpoint changes, and so it's not all consistent and it's not all good, and not every writer has a take that I really connect with. But that's also been interesting to see what aspects of the character in the book different writers really like latch on to.
Yeah.
Um, Surprisingly, one of the writers that I really, really loved his work on the book was Paul Jenkins. And like
Okay.
I've never been a huge Paul Jenkins fan. Um, but one major like check in the plus column for that is that Sean Phillips was doing the art for like that whole run. Huge
Okay.
Sean Phillips fan. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that was huge for me. But also there was um there was a real authenticity to how he wrote the character, and he did that thing where he like found the core of the character in a way that other writers didn't. And like Garth Ennis wrote a very famous run,
Yeah.
like the Dangerous Habits storyline where John gets lung cancer. Like that's Garth Ennis, and like, um, but for as good of a writer as young Garth Ennis was, I think he was like 22 or 21 at the
Oh, wow.
time when he got that job. Um, it it's it feels like it's a lot about Garth Ennis and not a lot about what Garth Ennis could bring to John Constantine, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas like the best writers, and Paul Jenkins, I feel like really did this. They either need to have like a wholly original take on the character where they can just like bring a whole new side of them into existence just from scratch, like Brian Azzarello did a great job. Or what Paul Jenkins did is, at least what it felt like, is he brought a lot of himself to the character in a way that really enhanced the character, and it gave a dimension to the character rather than just like, Garth Ennis ultimately, like his run on the book ends up reading a lot like Preacher, where like
Okay.
it's really just about Garth Ennis like dealing with religion, which is
Yeah.
fine. That's not like necessarily a criticism. It's just like I connected way more to Paul Jenkins' take on it because it felt a lot more human, and it was more like, yes, it was still about magic and demons and all this, but it was, the core of the story was more about how uh, John Constantine was like relating to his friends and the people that he knew,
Yeah.
and the like how the things that he was doing were impacting their lives.
Okay.
Where like, in Garth Ennis's run, there's a priest who has a machine gun, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, we get it, but like that's a very Garth Ennis thing. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
to have a
Yeah.
priest character and give him a machine gun and like, okay, man, like,
Yeah. That's not surprising to hear, just based on the comics you yourself have made, and just in general. I think, for me myself, when I am reading a story and when I'm making a story, you know, the the larger landscape of the world is important, of course, yes, and like how what your main point is with the story, but you know, it doesn't mean anything if you don't give a shit about what's happening to the people in the story,
yeah,
and that's it's kind of funny because I keep coming across this, and that's something when Steve and I started working on Evie and the Helsings, that it was this book was that book was this book was it was going to be a lot more satirical. It was going to be a lot funnier. It was going to be a lot just more tongue in cheek. But Steve and I are just fucking saps. So we're like, once we're delving into the characters and we're like, here, listening to their stories, or developing their stories, and we're like, well, no, we're liking these people too much, too much to
yeah,
not take this at least a little more serious and all that. And and I find that just kind of the stories that I'm drawn into,
yeah,
myself, and Steve as well. And so I'm definitely not surprised, to
yeah,
hear that from you.
absolutely. And like that's really the core of it, right? Is like,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, at least what's most interesting to me, like, yes, the plot is important, but if it's just plot,
Hmm.
then there's no emotional hook,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
The
good plot and
characters
good
and like,
art, yeah, they can go a
being
long
able to
way,
relate to the
but
characters is of utmost importance. Like that's the most important thing.
yeah, yeah, one of my favorite books all time was We Three. It's
Yeah, of course.
top
Mhm.
3 of my books, and concept and art alone, it would probably be in my top 10. But the fact that I actually give a shit about this cat and this dog and this bunny, you know,
Oh yeah.
as beings that exist and their emotions and their feelings, and it didn't have to be that way. You didn't have to delve in that deep to it. You didn't have to like give them that kind of perspective on it, and it still would have been a good story. But yeah, it's just that extra sauce.
Oh
you,
yeah.
you get on that stuff.
That book's a
Um,
crusher, man. Like
I got
there
the
have
I
been
got
times where
the
like I've been talking about that book and I start thinking about it. I start thinking about the end of that book and I just can't. Like it's just too much.
yeah, I got the expanded edition whenever it
Mhm.
came out or whatever, and it was like one of those times where it's like I had to go back and look because I'm like, I don't recall, like, I didn't recognize right away what was new because it all
Mhm.
just fit in so well.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was so happy about that. Like, it's just like, oh, this is, I literally got more of the thing I love with like zero bad side effects, Um, it's just like, yeah, it is an amazing book. Um, but enough about that. Thanks for sharing your recommendations. um Comics, I've been trying really hard to like just like get back in the habit of reading comics. I just repaired my old Samsung tablet from like 10 years ago so I can have it just as a reader in my
Yeah.
bed. I had to change the charging port on it or whatever earlier, and so I just like loaded up all these PDFs I've been waiting to read and all that. And but I have been catching up. I have been reading our buddy Kelly Williams' book Skeeters,
Oh,
and
nice.
it's just a blast, man. It's just like the best, you know, movie that the best B horror movie yeah you didn't see in the 80s. And
I am just really happy that Kelly is working.
yeah, I mean,
And I
he's got
don't
that.
like the
Yeah,
saying that in that context makes it sound weird. I don't mean that in any sort of disparaging way. I mean that in the way that like Kelly is, one of my like easily the best friend I ever made in comics. Still a person I talk to very regularly. And he's so good
yeah,
that
he's
like
amazing.
the fact that there's been any time in his life where he's been struggling to like get that work has always been mind-boggling to me. 'Cause he's so
Yeah,
good, you
yeah,
know? So,
the
like,
comics
every
is
time he's got
wonderful.
a new project, every time he's got a new book, I'm just, like, thrilled for him.
Yeah, the comics world is better off having Kelly Williams with a book out as much as
Oh, yeah.
possible. And I'm sure I've said this to him before because I don't chat with Kelly as frequently as I was because he's the one who kind of like connected me to do this other book, Spend the Night, with the horror director Jackie Kong and all that, and he's kind of stepped aside from working on covers and stuff and all that. But he was doing layouts at first and all that and all that. But I told Kelly that just I always think his stuff is great, and then one day he'll just post a commission or something, and I'll be like, "Fuck, Kelly's good, man." Like, it's just like I know he's good, but then
Oh,
he'll just
yeah.
post something. It's like you're just reminded of just like, yeah, but he's good.
Yeah.
like,
I
like,
have I mean,
yeah.
because we tabled together or at least next to each other for so many years, I have a lot of Kelly's artwork
Mhm.
because inevitably at the end of any given show, there would be a sketch he did that nobody bought or and we would just trade. The end of
Yeah.
almost every show, I would just be like, "All right, I want that one. Give me that one." Like, and fairly recently, we were going through my portfolios looking for something to like put up on the wall in a spot that we had, and I've got a bunch of just Kelly drawings that are like this big, but they're all so fucking good.
Yeah.
Like I mean, I have several of his things hanging up, but also just like every little sketch that he would do just sitting around was just crazy
Yeah.
good. Like,
Yeah.
and it was that way for years, and he's only gotten better, which is
Yeah.
awesome,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, it's awesome to see him. It's great to see him doing work that I just know he's having a blast with.
Yeah,
Like drawing
for sure.
giant mosquitoes killing an entire, killing people in an entire town. Like that's just, chef's kiss for Kelly what he does.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Give him
also the stuff
something
he's doing
splattery
with
to draw and he's happy.
yeah, yeah, and the stuff he's doing with goats flying press and all that and
Mhm.
I forget the name of the title of the book, of course, but that was also a really cool concept and story. Just yeah, just anything with that vibe, and Kelly's killing it. But yeah, that's what I've been reading, or just read, I should say.
Nice.
So a shout out to Bob and Kevin, the Word Bros, for writing the book, and also for slinking the PDFs my way because they're sweethearts. But all right, so we've tackled the questions of the show. Naturally, you know, I want to talk to you about non-human audio. You kind of mentioned at the start of the conversation that it was kind of something you just kind of fell into, and I totally get that. I know, you didn't say this, or if you did, I don't remember, but I'm sure it was just like, I'm gonna try making a pedal. I want to do something fun, like a fun little side project, and you made it. Like, this is actually really good, and you made another one, and then people were like, "Hey, are you selling those?" And then not naturally,
Yeah.
here we go. But uh, before we get into the origins of non-human audio, I'm gonna take our first question from Instagram, and that is from our mutual bud Kevin Mellon,
Oh.
and that is he wants to know, what's the most fun part about the actual process of making a pedal.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, first, thanks, Kevin. Kevin actually has the distinction of owning a very early version of my delay pedal that was actually quite a bit different from the production version. So he's got kind of like a one-off version of that delay pedal. He also has the distinction of owning a distortion pedal that I built him that will probably never see production. So Kevin's got a couple of potential. He's sitting on a couple gold mines.
Well,
That's
Kevin
an
and I are
interesting
working on some
question.
tunes together, so I have to see if he's putting that on any of them. So
Oh, he has. Yeah, I mean, he's sent me some clips. Um, I think he doesn't send me everything certainly, but like he's definitely sent me some clips of stuff that he's worked on, and he'll be like, "Yeah, the Mockingblur's on this part or whatever," you know. But that is an interesting question. I mean, I guess yeah, I could kind of take it two ways. Like the most fun part of like the entire process, or the most fun part of building specifically. Um, because like the most fun part of the entire process is like the development phase, like for sure.
yeah,
Getting to sit there and like problem solve and to it's not that different from drawing, to be perfectly honest, because you're sitting there faced with something that's not exactly what you want it to be, and you have to figure out how to get it there. um so in comics that's storytelling, visual framing, pacing, whatever it might be, panel layout. And with pedals it's just audio, right? So
yeah,
I was just working on something the other day. I have a new prototype, and like I had like one chunk of it that was really good and that I was happy with, but then this other chunk that wasn't there. So it's really fun for me to like take that bit that's not working and keep experimenting with it and trying new things and trying different things and being like, well, maybe this will work, or like maybe this will work, or maybe I can try this, or maybe I can try this, because in doing those little bits of problem solving, it's just creativity flowing. And
Mhm.
more often than not, through those experiments, I come up with something different that I was never planning. And I end up surprising myself in that regard because, like, my most popular pedal, I didn't even plan to design the way I designed it. It came about through that experimentation, and it was several mistakes that I made that made it do what it does. And, as soon as I turned it on, I knew it was wrong, but I was also like, this is really interesting. This is cool.
Mhm.
So it's like that part of it, that development part is like so much fun. It's so much fun
Yeah.
because it's pure conceptualization and learning.
Mhm.
Every step of that way, if something works or doesn't work exactly like you think, there's a lot of like, well, why is it doing this? And figuring that out. And that's really fun for me. Um, I've always really enjoyed like self-learning through my entire life, whatever it might be. And
Yeah.
this is all that. So, um, the most fun part of like the physical act of building, um, is probably the doing the enclosures because I do
Okay.
every enclosure by hand, so
Yeah.
they all come out a little bit different, and
Mhm.
that's really fun for me because like I have my process, and every pedal is consistent with the other pedals of that model. And that's a weird way to say it, but it's like every slow
Yeah.
loris is finished basically the same way.
Yeah.
Um, but everyone comes out looking slightly different, and that's really cool, and that's really fun to kind of like watch that happen. Because past that, the actual like assembly, like putting together boards, which I have
Yeah.
right here. There we go.
Yeah.
Like it's fun, but in a different way. It's very meditative. It's
Mhm.
um, I'm basically following my own instructions, but
Yeah.
sitting down and like putting the resistors in 20 boards and soldering 20 boards and then putting the next chunk of resistors in and soldering them. It's like
Mhm.
it's repetitive, but um, it's kind of like I wouldn't say it's fun, but it's really relaxing in like kind of this weird like detaching kind of way.
Oh, no, yeah, I 100% understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask that question, like, is there kinda like a zen to just, like, since you are the one wiring everything and putting all the boards together and all that,
Hmm.
like, is there like a zen moment where you're just like, "I gotta do all these," and you just kind of do it?
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah, absolutely. And
yeah.
I'll lose track of a day
Mhm.
sometimes. I'll get to work late morning on a Saturday, right? And get kind of like everything prepped for the day because I pretty much every day have an idea of what I need to get done.
Mhm.
Of whether it's like, well, today I have to cut and wire these boards. Today I have to put these boards in the enclosures. Today I have to prep these enclosures so I can finish them tomorrow, whatever it might be. But like getting everything prepped and then, kind of like once I'm like just going, and a whole day will pass and I'll be like, oh shit, it's dinner time. you know, just because I'm just kind of sitting doing my thing and like there's always work to do.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
it's just kind of like going through the steps of the process. I usually have um, a couple different things in different stages, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, like, well, actually, I left them outside, but like today, working on, um, I was working on enclosures for the new pedal that's coming out, and I was also assembling a slow loris for a trade I was doing with somebody else, and I was also working on my breadboard working on tweaks for something.
Mhm.
And that's just kind of how this goes. Like I've got stuff in different stages of being worked on because I kind of need to like have something ready to go as soon as one thing is done.
Yeah.
Um, just by nature of like how much I have to get done now, you know?
Yeah.
So
No, yeah, it's yeah, it's part of the one man operations. You got to have, even with comics or, music or making pedals, like there's always several pots on the stove. One boils faster than the other, and you just got to keep everything
yeah.
moving, just keep everything going.
Yeah. That's a great question though, because like I do really enjoy almost all of the process, but I definitely wouldn't refer to all of it as fun,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So getting to think
Oh
about it in
no,
that way
yeah.
is interesting.
It's. I mean, I've done plenty of things, even just like having to repair things, just simple things in my. Well, I just mentioned like I had to repair my old tablet today because the charging point wasn't working. It was like a 10-year-old tablet. And, it wasn't fun to like go, the spudger around, take out the screen and unplug the things, but I enjoyed just doing it and just having it done. And then there we go,
Yeah.
instead of having to buy, I don't have to buy anything, but like, instead of like, convincing myself to buy some used or more expensive tablet, I spent $8 and fixed a perfectly fine one.
Yeah. No, I actually do really enjoy working with my hands,
Yeah,
and I really enjoy the process of doing something that doesn't require just sitting at a computer.
yeah,
Um, so like, the pedals thing, since I have to do it so much and it is very repetitive, like I said, it doesn't translate as fun that much. But
hmm,
like, I repaired my friend's amp not that long
yeah,
ago. And like, first of all, if you don't know what you're doing, everybody listening or watching, do not attempt to repair your amp yourself.
no, very
They're very
dangerous, very
dangerous.
dangerous.
The only reason I agreed to do it is because I knew the amp and I knew what was wrong with it and I knew I could do it without much danger. Don't attempt to repair your amp yourself if you don't know what you're doing.
No, that'd be
But that
big,
disclaimer out of the
big.
way, that was a really fun project for me. It was just, an afternoon. It just needed a little bit of work, but like, getting to like get in there and wrench the stuff apart and desolder
Mhm.
and had to put in a new power switch and, you know, clean out some pots, and
Yeah,
that's fun. That's just fun for
yeah,
me,
yeah, yeah. I enjoy a lot of that stuff too. Like over this past, just after Christmas, we had a week off. The kids, had a week off. I took a week off of work. My wife took a week off, and my, free time was maintenance on all these guitars,
Yeah.
like going and polishing frets and changing strings and, cleaning everything up. And I enjoyed it. I
Oh
enjoyed
yeah.
that process of it. I didn't enjoy like the realization that I have way too many guitars, but I'm not saying I have too many guitars. I'm just saying I have too many guitars.
Hey man,
Um,
I got too many guitars. I got more. I got too many guitars. I got a lot of
what's the
I got
count
a lot
up?
of
What's the count up
guitars.
to? What's the count up to?
Uh, well, right now there's 10 in this room,
Hmm.
not in cases. Um, and then I have, let's see, there's one Telecaster in a case, my Jazzmaster in a case, my SG in a case, my Les Paul in a case, my Stratocaster in a case, bass in a case, two acoustic guitars in cases. Um, so what's that? 18?
At, as as of when my other Solar guitar comes in from the buy one get one free sale, it'll be 21.
Oh yeah. Well, you have basses too, right? You probably have
I
more
I
than one
I
bass.
have, yeah, I have a 5-string Mexican Fender. I have my 4-string Ibanez. I have a 4-string Harley Benton. I have an acoustic bass, and I have a 4 string American P bass. So it's 5 basses,
Yeah.
and then the rest, But I think you're like me in terms of like, yeah, it's a lot of guitars, but each one does a different thing.
Yeah.
Each one has a different vibe. You pick one of those up, you're doing something you wouldn't be doing on the other guitar with that.
Yeah.
And
Well, also,
especially, yeah.
I like this past summer, I had a friend that was working at a pawn shop and they were closing, so they had to get rid of everything.
Okay.
So I ended up with 3 guitars just from that.
Yeah, it's okay. Okay, I don't feel so bad now because it's like, I didn't have that many guitars at the beginning of like the pandemic and all that. It kind of became it coincided with like kind of being my pandemic coping mechanism,
Oh, yeah.
sided with my discovery and appreciation of cheaper guitars just being really well made these days.
Mhm.
Like one of like out of all the guitars, like if I had to pick my 3 favorite guitars, they're all vastly different. You know,
Sure.
my this Sunburst SG is a Firefly SG, costs 189. Granted,
Yeah.
I put in some new pickups and whatever in there recently, but even then before that, I loved it. I just vibed with that guitar immediately.
Mhm.
And then my other favorite guitar is my John 5 Squire Fender Telecaster. Whoa, sorry, my mic just dropped. My John 5's, and that was like a $400 guitar that I
Yeah.
bought like when I first started playing guitar again, like in 2014. And then my most recent purchase was my Solar Baritone, which was like the most expensive guitar I've ever purchased, which is like
Mhm.
it was like $1,500, which I only paid for because one, I was getting another like $800 guitar free out of the deal.
Right, yeah, I remember when they were running that sale, yeah.
Yeah, it was nuts. And then, but like those three are like my favorite guitars right now, and they're so different,
Yeah.
and their cost so different. But to me, I love them all, and
Well,
it's
yeah, I
great.
mean, I have yeah, I mean, there yeah. One of my favorite guitars is one of those pawn shop Jacksons that it was like $80, you know? Um, they do all kind of different things, and, you know, I am I don't know, don't have the affinity for, like, mega cheap new guitars like you do, you know? I have some cheap old guitars because of the pawn shop thing, and I have some more affordable older guitars just because I've gotten good deals. Um, but more often than not, the guitars I end up spending, or the guitars in my life that I've spent the most money on, um, just didn't really stick around as my favorites. You know, for whatever reason, I had a '90s American Telly that was like one of my first, not one of my first, but it was one of my first big guitar purchases that I made in a long time at that
Yeah.
time. I had, um, I just hadn't bought a new guitar in a long time. And I really just wanted like a Telecaster, like capital T Telecaster.
Yeah.
And I found this one on Reverb, and it was early 90s. I think it was a 92 American
Hmm.
Telly, and it looked great. It was like real nice sunburst with like a nice kind of like subtle but noticeable wood grain pattern. And I bought it, and it was fine.
Hmm.
It sounded good, played fine. There was nothing wrong with it. But as somebody that's played a lot of guitars, sometimes
Yeah.
you just don't click with a guitar.
Yeah.
And, that's the risk of ordering, really, without
Yeah.
playing.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I have some other ones that I've ordered that have really worked out. Um, I posted on Instagram the other day about this guitar, which
Yeah, you were
is
posting on, I think you mentioned on Instagram the other day, like, you have
yeah,
all these, like, nice classic really nice guitars you've built,
yeah,
and, your favorite ones lately have been these crazy Jacksons that are all
yeah.
pointy and,
And
you
I
know
love my Telecasters that I've built, like, absolutely. I love my Jaguars that I've modified. They do a thing very well, and when I play them, I still love them, and I still connect with them. But, like, if I'm going to grab a guitar, it's this one,
Mhm.
which is a 1990 oop, I have my computer.
That's it.
1995 Jackson
Okay.
Dinky Reverse,
Looks great.
purple,
It's
which is,
got that
like,
nice purple
one of the
is it
reasons
almost
I
like a
bought it.
pearlescent, or is that just the video?
What's that?
Is it like a pearlescent almost?
Yeah. Yeah.
It looks like the color
I think
changed
they
just a
called it,
bit.
like, metallic violet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's really
Um,
sharp. Yeah.
but, like, that's one I ordered. I saw it on Reverb because, like, I have saved searches on Reverb for stuff I just
Mhm.
like looking at
Yeah.
that I almost never consider buying. So, like, one of them is just 90s Jacksons because I think they look awesome. And I
Yeah.
like looking at them when I go on Reverb. And I saw that one night and I was like, oh, mid 90s, reverse dinky. It's got like the shark fin inlays. And I was like, it's double humbucker. I don't actually have a double. Oh, no, I do have another double humbucker, but I didn't have a double, just a straight double humbucker
Yeah.
guitar with a Floyd Rose, which I
Mhm.
have grown to really like. Um, and I was like, it's black. Like, that's cool. All black, all
Yeah.
blacked out. And I went and I looked at the picture. I was like, oh, it's not black. It's purple. I was
Even
like, it's
better.
this deep, deep purple. And it sat on Reverb. And then I saw it again because the guy like dropped the price and he was taking offers.
Oh,
And I
okay.
was like, I gotta at least like take a shot, you know? And it got here and I love it. Like, I love it. It's like easily my
Nice.
favorite guitar right now. It's super light, super
Nice.
playable. The neck is
Mhm.
crazy thin, which I
Yeah.
never thought I would like,
Mhm.
but for whatever reason, it just works on this guitar,
Yeah,
you know?
the Jackson necks, I got a Jackson, the entry level dinky or whatever. I've mentioned it a million times on the show, but I got it from, fellow artist and musician Mike Norton.
Yeah, yeah.
He,
Yeah, I remember when you got that one.
he
Yeah.
he went on a kind of a guitar kick himself, and he bought it because he wanted a metal guitar, and he's like, I don't know if it was like he just didn't like it, or he's just like, I don't need this.
Yeah.
And he gave it to me for a really like he sold it to me for like $50 or something like that.
Yeah.
I think I paid him like a little bit more just because I felt bad because he also threw in like Invader pickups, and I'm like,
Hmm.
that's like what you're charging me like 10% of what you paid for all this. Um, so, but and I it was a super thin neck, and I loved playing that guitar. I'm actually, I'm looking to get rid of it soon though, because that other Solar I'm getting is a super strat, you know.
Mm.
So it's going to kind of like replace whatever I was using the Jackson for. And the idea of like vibing with guitars, like, I'm going to probably start whittling down what I have, because there's some guitars I've had for quite a long time that I'm realizing like I'm just not vibing with this is just not. I have this Epiphone P90 gold top Les Paul that I've had for probably 20 years at this point. I bought it when I was in in a band called the Late Nights with Adam Levy.
That's
Uh,
right.
I bought it. I
Adam
didn't use it
Bones.
because I was playing bass in that band, but the other guitar player used it for a show or something and broke the nut, which I actually finally replaced like 20 years later, after super gluing it a bunch of times. But like I realize now, like I never really just vibed with that guitar.
Yeah.
So now I'm like, well, I'm gonna clean it up because it's got some love dings and stuff on scratches and stuff. But I'm gonna clean it up, and I'm probably just gonna sell it and just get rid of it because I don't use it. It doesn't do a thing I need it to do. That
Yeah.
SG I got, like, it's got humbuckers in there, but they're like as P90 as a humbucker can get, and that's perfectly fine for me.
Sure.
For all my fuzzy needs, for all my future cave bear uses. Um, It's gonna suit me fine. And also, I've got like, one of my other guitars is my old acoustic guitar, which is banged up. It's got a hole in it, and I have a nice um, budget acoustic that my wife got me for my birthday a couple years ago. That's easily replaced that one. So that's like another guitar. I'm like, I don't really use it. I don't need it. Just keeping it around in case my kids want to plug on it one day, or whatever, you know.
Right.
And so on and so forth. But you mentioned like you didn't have a double humbucker guitar with the Floyd,
Yeah.
and that's what I wanted, and that's why I got this Harley Benton over here, uh, which I don't really play. I like it; it's fine, it's comfortable to play. It's got stainless steel frets. It was super cheap. Sounds good. I put the dime bucker in there because, of course, um, you put, but like it's just like I wanted the guitar that did that thing. So, them being quote unquote affordable these days and still sounding good. And
Yeah.
also, I like to tinker. I like to change pots and change electronics on things. So that's always appealed to me with that. But I've derailed this enough talking about guitars and gear because I would love to talk about that all the time.
No, man. I mean,
But
it's all connected, right? Because it's all
yeah,
like the idea of tinkering with it, like that ties into the pedal thing too. Because like
yeah,
I rewired every single guitar I have except for one of them.
hmm,
One guitar. I have one guitar that nothing has been changed on.
nice,
And like that's kind of part of it is like our brains
yeah,
work that way. We like
yeah,
doing that stuff. So like, that's part of the fun. Getting back
yeah,
to Kevin's question is like
yeah,
that experimentation of like, well, what if I try wiring it this way? Or what if I try this value
hmm,
pot? Or what if I try this humbucker or
yeah,
this one? Like, that's all fun. It's fun to
yeah.
experiment. It's fun to mess around. And
I had one of those Squire. I have one of those Squire Bass Sixes.
yeah,
It's
I can see it behind you.
Yeah, yeah. And a couple years ago, I had routed it out for a humbucker in the bridge because I wanted to try having a baritone.
Mhm.
And since then, I now have two baritones. I have a Firefly telebaritone, which is this behind the black one. It's silver. Love it. Sounds great. And then I have the solar baritone. I'm like, okay, I have two fucking baritone guitars now. Let
Yeah.
me. And I just put the Squire back into what it was before, just a standard bass six with the single coil and all that, because in of itself, it's a funky instrument. Like it's a
Yeah.
octave. It's like it's yeah, it can get make it sound like a bass, but it's also like not a bass.
Yeah.
It's a really cool mellow guitar. I just call it a mellow guitar just because you can do the chords and strum it and all that, and it just sounds just really pleasant to me. And
Yeah.
so
Base
yeah,
sixes
the tinkering
are
is always
they're
there, even
cool.
if it's taking it back to normal, to
Yeah.
what it was before. It's always there.
Yeah. Base sixes are really cool. And like you said, they're technically bases,
Yeah, I mean, I'm
but
sure if
not
I wanted to like
really.
lay down a bass track and I put that and I put my bass amp stuff, Sims and stuff on there, it'll sound like a bass.
Yeah.
But it
But it doesn't really
also,
play like one.
yeah, yeah, you don't, when I pick it up, I'm not thinking like a bass player.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking like a guitar player. I'm just thinking like, I tend to think more just there's a ton of stuff I've recorded with that thing that I've never put out in videos or whatever. Usually if I'm putting out a video on Instagram, it's just like a riff or something. But there's like so many other things I do musically that I just don't put out just because I don't know if these are formed thoughts or things I'll develop or it's just like a sketch, you know? And not everyone needs to see all my sketches, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
For sure.
so it seems ridiculous. I have all these guitars and I try to do all in, and I say, oh, because they all do a different thing. But then I just post, it's like, yeah, but part of my goal of 2024 and moving forward is to actually start putting out music, finishing things and putting out music. And
Yeah.
I have to scratch my metal itch first.
Yeah.
you know, I have
Well,
to get that going
the
before I
other thing
start.
about owning a lot of guitars is that, like,
And also, fuck you, it's fun, man.
yeah,
I love it.
that's
It's
basically
great.
what I was gonna say. Like,
It's fun.
they're fun. They make
Yeah.
you happy. You like owning them. Who
Yeah, I
cares?
mean, like I got my,
If you're using them as tools and you have a lot of redundant tools, and some that
Yeah.
you like more than others, sure, get rid of them. But like,
Yeah.
it's fun having them, and that's all
Yeah.
that matters.
Yeah. And it's kind of nice. It's like, sitting down whenever I, do give myself some time to play and be like, what am I feeling? And if I'm feeling like I just want to like, you know, just like honky tonk around a little bit, I got a straight up Telecaster I can use, a cheap $90 glary Telecaster that I put $120 Tex-Mex Fender pickups into, which sound great.
Yeah.
And now I love the thing. I put some locking tuners, some standard locking tuners on there, and the thing doubled in weight. Like it's such a light, like the frets on these things are like pencil thin, but it's still really fun to play.
Yeah.
And it does the thing. It does a thing that my other guitars back here are not going to do. And it's nice just having that option, just like with art, sitting down and just you know whether I'm working digitally or traditionally, or doing sequentials, or trying to do more stuff with this texture collage stuff I've been trying to experiment with digitally and all that, just for fun things. Um, it's just nice to have the tools to just kind of like do what I want to do. And the older I get, the more I'm just willing to be like, just accept, like, I just want to sit down and do the thing. I don't want to be overly precious about like, oh no, I have to be able to do it with this one specific, I have to make this thing incredibly versatile. No, just get the thing that does the thing, and then I'll be
Yeah.
happy, And speaking of getting the things that do the thing, non-human audio pedals, they do the thing. It's really interesting because, I ordered my Cave Bear, and you sent me a note, and if you don't want me to post this publicly, I won't. I'll cut it out. But you kind of mentioned that mine wasn't acting right,
Yeah. Yeah.
so to speak.
No,
So
this is all. This is
in
all.
itself,
Yeah.
it was like a one-off, which I was totally cool with. Like, I just,
Yeah.
one, I thought it sounded gnarly. Two, I wanted to support you and your endeavor, and I'm like, this is cool. And the fun slash frustrating slash interesting thing has been like listening to the Cave Bear demos, versus how I have to use it, because I don't have amps. I go into
Right.
my interface,
Yeah.
and I was trying to like think about how can I verbalize this to Dave, like what my experience is with it. And it feels like, because I have like a bass amp in my garage that I should pull out and just fuck around with one day, but it feels like the demos, like, with the Cave Bear, it's like the Cave Bear is this gnarly wave, and you're just trying to get on there and ride that wave. And with plugging it into the interface, it's almost like you're trying to catch up to the wave, and get on top of it before it passes, because it's just not reacting the same way,
Mm.
which, is frustrating, and one where I wish it roared like it was in front of an amp, because I'm sure if I put it in front of an amp, it's just going to be a Cave Bear. But then the interfacing is like fine, but it's been fun kind of finding what can I do to do all that,
Hmm.
because it's almost like, for some reason, like there's no reason I should have to, but like I have to like boost it, but also I have to like, I have to make sure the boosting is really clean, because otherwise it gets, well, I don't have to, because it gets really fucking nasty in a really cool way. And I think that's where like a lot of our tastes align. Like I'm always down for like, this sounds like not good, but it sounds good. you know, it doesn't sound pleasant, but it's
Yeah.
tickling my brain, and I like this. Um, so it's
Yeah.
been really fun
Yours.
experimenting with that, and
Yours is
even
an
like,
interesting one. And we talk about experimenting with things and the learning process and how that's fun. Um, Yours was interesting because like when you have not like the first cave bear, but a really early one. Looks like you have number three.
okay,
So,
hey, I like that number.
um,
That's my
and
birthday. So.
that early on, I had designed the circuit and built my own and I built my own using the components that I designed it with. Um, because in kind of some troubleshooting at one point, a friend of mine who had also worked on pedals, he was like, "Well, are you using the same components that you know you just like? Are you putting
Yeah.
the components on the breadboard and then putting them in the pedal kind of thing?" So I made sure to do that, but the problem was the way I designed it. The components I had actually chosen were out of typical spec for that kind of component. Like the transistors that I used were a certain type of transistor called a BC109, but the ones that I had used in the original version were a different gain range than almost all BC109s just by chance. I had just like I bought some and the ones I chose to design with were a different gain range. And that circuit is very sensitive to small changes because it's not a very complicated circuit. It's essentially just two transistors just like totally blowing each other apart. But what that means is that if you're if you're giving the transistors a little bit too much power, just a little bit or a little too little power, it doesn't work right. So I built yours BC109 transistors, all the same specs, but those were those transistors, which most of them are, were in a different gain range than I had designed the circuit for. And I didn't even know that at the time. Your pedal was the one that made me realize that because I was working on yours and I kept going back to mine and I was measuring everything. And I measured, it wasn't until I took the transistors out and measured them and then measured the transistors that were in yours that I realized what the issue was. Um, and then the transistors that ended up in yours were actually different transistors entirely because those were the ones I had that were in the right gain range that worked
Yeah.
properly. Um, but like you said, like I said in the note, um, it did make it kind of this interesting slight one-off. Like it's a cave bear circuit, but it does actually sound a little bit different because it has different transistors in it, which act just different enough. Um, I did end up like redesigning the circuit eventually to make it easier to build because since I didn't really know what I was doing when I designed it, every time somebody would buy one, yours was like the most hair pulling because it was the first one and I knew even
Yeah.
less what I was doing. But every time somebody would buy one, I would just like kind of have to like take a deep breath and like prepare myself to like it might work. It might also not work, and I might have to tweak a bunch of stuff to make it work. And yeah, so eventually I redesigned it to like make it work better. Um, and then just like discontinued it anyway.
I mean, if it's more trouble than it's worth, and
Well,
um,
yeah.
and just for the record, like I'm very happy with mine. I sorry for I might edit it out, but if you heard a ton of Velcro noise, I was taking it off my pedal board while Dave was talking earlier because I wanted to show it to the camera. But like, I love mine. Like, just aesthetically, I love it.
I'm glad,
Um,
yeah.
and when I first got it, there's this big old honking dial on here for the volume, and my dumbass was like, I had this like I thought this was like gain, like not just like, so I had it all the way up,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, this thing's just like farting out the whole time. Like, I don't want to tell Dave this thing's not working. I feel terrible. And then I just stopped. I'm like, wait, he sent me instructions. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
This is how like little I use pedals. Um, and since I primarily go into amp sims and all that, I recently again, hat tip to Kevin Millen again because he popped me to this. But apparently, there's like a whole revelation with everybody of like how where your interface gain should be at if you're using
Mm,
different companies' amp sims.
okay.
And I had to I just like restructured all my presets to account for that, so it's like a cleaner DI signal. And so then when I hooked up the cave bear and all that to like see how that was going to react to things, I'm like, oh man, this is going to be really cool because it's reacting in a, I think, a better way now to
Mm,
having like a low, like my input level is for my guitar on my interface is like 0.
yeah.
And
Yeah, that
so it's like,
pedal is also insanely loud,
yeah,
which,
so
um
I'm really looking forward to finding like where's the sweet spot for this for me for the sound I'm looking for, because there's a few fuzzy tunes that I'm working on that I definitely need to have. I definitely want the cave bear on. Um, that will be hopefully showing up in the next arc of Evie and the Helsings anyway.
yeah.
But I'm really looking forward to that. But I'm more so just really excited to see where your stuff's going with non-human audio, because you had the cave bear, you've had a few things, the mocking blair and the slow loris. Like whenever I see you post about those, it feels like people are just like frothing at the mouth to get one, or how much they want to talk about they love theirs. And seeing people, musicians and stuff that I would normally come across on bigger platforms raving about your stuff, like I'm always happy when my friends are doing well and the things they're passionate about are being well received. And it's just been really awesome to see non-human audio with that. I know that was never your intention. um
Yeah.
and it's really, I know it's hard to tell like what the future holds and all that with all that, but like how, do you see right now, can you like see a future with non-human audio being bigger, like maybe even like you're not doing all the work yourself. You're not I know you've started getting the custom boards printed and stuff like, which is cool
Yeah.
and all that, but in terms of like, I don't see you not doing the enclosures, because I feel like you probably would just, even though it is work, I'm sure if you're like me, you're gonna be like, I still want to have my fingerprint on this.
Yeah, it's hard to say, because the last year or so has been such a transition and been so different from the previous, 8 months, the first
Yeah.
7, 8 months of the company, quote unquote company at the time. Um, it's hard to say. Like you said, that me doing all the enclosures by hand is still very important to me, um, because it is important to me to like be a part of every step of the process that I can be, and I think that makes it cool for people.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
absolutely what drew a lot of people to my stuff in the first place, is the way it looked. And there's a potential, especially with the slow lowers, that eventually I might need to be able to produce it in quantities that would make it difficult to hand do every enclosure. But one thing I've kind of talked about with some friends of mine is like the possibility of maybe eventually doing kind of like, I don't know if you're familiar with Zvex effects, but they
I
did like the
guess I
Fuzz
am.
Factory and the Box of Rock, and but what they eventually started doing is you could buy the more expensive hand painted version
Okay.
or the cheaper one that's like screen printed.
Okay.
Um, and eventually that might be a kind of an option that I could go down, as like the cheaper one that's, I just get the enclosure and it's just easier for me to just build them and ship them, or the fancier one, you know. But I don't,
Yeah, I think it's a great, I think that's a great option to have for people. Like, I
yeah,
think I would definitely, like, there's a lot of these like more boutique pedal places, and not in a derogatory terms. I know some people consider boutique pedal like, don't call us that, we just make our stuff. But like just these smaller pedal companies where like I want to support you, and I know you got to do all this stuff, and you have like really cool enclosures or really cool things. It's like, but if there's something else I could do, because like I'm not the type of guy who's I'm not really a pedal guy. I've got a few, but most of them are like I think if you add up, uh, well, not I guess not, but like the aside from the cave bear, like the most expensive one was the dark glass clone from Joyo. So
Yeah.
it's like, but even then, that's like half the price of some of these other pedals, and they're totally worth the cost in terms of like the effort. I'm like, is there a way you can not have to put that much effort and I could still buy your
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah, I
And
mean,
it sounds like a good idea, like
I
to have like a cool pre-printed enclosure,
yeah.
and you still get the sound, but
Yeah, maybe someday,
you
and it's like can being who I am, I can extrapolate a future where like I do have employees and I need to hire people to do certain aspects.
Mhm.
I'm certainly not there yet. Um, but as of now, the business continues to grow, even though I'm constantly afraid or just constantly assuming it's not going to, or it's going to stop or slow down. I mean, like, I have this constant mindset, and it comes from music and comics of seeing these people that have the one hit, the
Mhm.
one book that takes off and everybody loves, and then they just disappear. Or a friend in
Yeah.
a band that has a record that takes off and they get to like tour for a couple years and they get kind of famous and then nobody really cares after that.
Yeah.
Um, so I do feel very fortunate and very lucky that like I do have at least one pedal that people really seem to like.
Yeah.
Um, it's not something I ever really thought I would have. I mean, to be able to like be such a fan of the industry and I mean the art form, if you want to call it, to be able to contribute something in a meaningful way is meaningful to me.
Yeah.
Um, it's really cool, but I am also just painfully aware that like there's a ceiling to it.
Mhm.
I mean, like I have
Yeah.
friends that have sold 10,000 of one pedal, which is astronomical to me. Can I sell 10,000 slow lorises? I don't know, maybe, but maybe not. You know,
Mhm.
it might the ceiling might be 500. You know, and it's hard to say if anything else will kind of take off,
Yeah.
or be as popular as that. I hope so. Obviously, I hope so. But I don't think I would. I could see a future where that is a possibility of like having a functioning
Mhm.
like company that's not just me. But I will have a hard time accepting that that is a future possibility until I get to that point.
Yeah. I mean,
Like until I'm about to hire somebody, I'm going to be like, I don't know. I don't know if I don't know.
I mean, it's definitely a daunting thing to think about for sure. And I totally get where you're coming from about, just, having that one thing, and then is there more after this? Is this, and, being 41, and for, last year was probably the most prolific and profitable I've had of a year making comics. And just sitting back and actually seeing the numbers of people who bought issues of Spend the Night and Evie and the Helsings, and like adding that together in my brain and realizing like, oh, that's a lot of people just in general.
Yeah.
It's not like, it's not like I'm, gonna, you know, make a full-time living off of it at this point in time, but like it was definitely the most ever.
Yeah.
And it was like, and just, but the number that was really getting me was just the sheer number of people who bought the book, just the number of the people who bought it. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, okay, well, this is great. I think I'm at a point where I'm mature enough now where I'm like, and if this is it, okay, I made a run at it. I'm doing what I'm. You know, I think the one thing that drives me the most with my stuff, is that, you know, not only, and a lot of it has to do with my kids. Is like I want them to know that dad tried to do something he loved and he went full ass into it. And if it didn't work out, fine. If in a few years and my kids are, a little bit older and I go get a regular day job or whatever or something like that, um, and have to like put comics on a far back burner because I'm not going to stop. Music and comics don't stop. But, if I have to like make that my priority first, then I'll be okay with that, you know?
Yeah.
Um, 10 years ago, would me have said that? No, probably not. But then again, 10 years ago, me should have gotten his ass to get his shit together a lot sooner.
Yeah, I
that,
mean,
and it seems like, you're taking a very measured, appreciative approach. And that's really great. And I think that's a really smart way, emotionally healthy way to approach it too, because it's like you can enjoy, the gains you're making with getting the pet out there and seeing people's responses, and you're not instantly like, that's it, we're off to the races, I'm making pedals now, you know
yeah, I'm
and
definitely, I mean, obviously,
hopefully, yeah,
I'm doing
yeah,
my best to like make it happen. I'm doing my best to sell the pedals that I'm building, obviously,
yeah,
because it doesn't make any sense to just build them and let them
yeah,
sit there. But I am also just kind of like letting it happen.
yeah,
I'm taking the opportunities when they present themselves, and I'm just kind of letting it grow organically because it is growing organically, which is really weird and really cool. But it's like that one of those things is like, yeah, I didn't and I wouldn't immediately just be like, all right, like you said, all right, this is it. Like,
hmm,
you know, um, because every step of the way when those gains happen and these doors open and these things happen, I'm more confused by it happening than anything. Like I'm more surprised every time
yeah.
it happens. I'm just kind of like, shit, I didn't think that would happen. Like that's wild. Like every time.
Oh,
So,
yeah, yeah,
it's like that's one of those weird things is like every every creative endeavor we have, whether it's a band or a comic or whatever piece of merch you design, you have these like pipe dream things of like,
hmm,
well, it would be really cool if this happened, but it'll probably never
yeah,
happen. It would be really
yeah,
cool if this happened, but that'll probably never happen.
yeah.
And like I've not only like had a bunch of those things happen, and every single time I'm just like, this is bizarre. Like how is this my life? But I've had things happen that I never could have even dreamed of happening because like my brain wouldn't ever go there.
Hmm,
Like, and that's stuff that like when it happens, I'm just like, what? Like, what? How is that a thing? Like,
yeah.
I don't, you can
It's
edit this out if you want, but like a friend of a friend is a session guy in LA and like he bought a Slow Loris and like really liked it. So he bought a second one because he liked it so much that he was using it on every session and would didn't want to keep taking it off of his pedal boards and moving it to different pedal boards. So he bought a
okay.
backup so he could have two in different
Nice,
places.
nice.
And he hit me up, and this was a couple months ago now, but he hit me up and he was like, "Hey man, uh, do you have any slow lorises like ready to sell?" And I was like, "I don't, but I'm about to do a restock, so I have a bunch of boards ready. I could put one together for you real quick if you want. Like, what's up?"
Mhm.
And he was like, "Oh, well, we're gonna do these quote unquote secret shows with Mumford and Sons this weekend, and I want to get one for Marcus because I think he'd really like it." And I was like, "What?" And I went and I looked up, and like, sure enough, this guy Mason, who's now a buddy of mine, like, was in Marcus Mumford's solo backing band when he was doing like solo
Okay.
shows. And then
Mhm,
when Mumford and Sons was playing Austin City Limits Fest late last year, he was
mhm.
in like just in Mumford and Sons, like in he was like one of the sons, I guess. And like and he was like, "Yeah, like Marcus, he's actually like a real gearhead, like he's a real tone guy. He's like he digs that stuff. I think he'd really like it." So I put together the pedal and basically overnighted it to LA, and Mason gave Marcus Mumford one of my pedals. Like what? Like that's just
Why would I
like
cut this
and
out?
that's
This
one
is
of those things where
gold.
it's like
This is gold.
like I my brain
Yeah,
would never have ever been like, it would be really cool if this happened, because
yeah.
that would never
Well,
even occur to me that that would be a thing.
Dave, I don't know the exact number of years I've known you. I mean, we met way back in the old 11 o'clock comics forum days. Um, and I want to say that's maybe over about a decade ago, maybe ish, maybe
Oh,
even earlier than that, older
it
than that.
at least I think. I mean,
Yeah.
um,
I think one of the earliest things I remember about our interactions is like you put out like an EP from like about Jonathan Hickman's Shield book, I think it
yeah,
was.
yeah, I did.
Was it Shield book or was it one of the Infinity books he did?
It was Shield.
Oh, Shield, okay.
Yeah,
So I was like, oh, cool, So,
yeah,
but throughout that entire time, you have never ever given me like the vibe that as someone who would be like buying into like your own bullshit, you know,
yeah. I don't think I
or
have the
like
ego for it.
yeah,
Yeah,
the story you just said, like it's really cool, and it's not like, oh, so and so from the Muffins has my pedal, you know that, right? And no, you legitimately, and it is the most honest uh take on it. Is just like what?
yeah. It's
Okay, I
like this is
guess this is
weird.
a thing, you know um I don't really have many stories like that myself. There's like, I hear cool things here and there with stuff, and it's always fun um to like have those little moments where you're just like, is this real life,
Well,
you
dude,
know
even I mean, and I'm sure that
even the
you
smallest things, like it's nice, like, just appreciate, like, I never thought this would happen, you
yeah,
know you know and even something as small as, like, like the something small I can equate it to is like, artists that I absolutely love and respect since I was a kid for now will like my Instagram riff posts and stuff, or comment on them, and I'm
yeah,
like, I laugh to myself. I'm like, well, I post art and they don't say anything. I post a riff and
yeah.
fine
Well,
by me though.
honestly, it's not that different, right? It's not
Like,
that
yeah,
different from
it's one of those
getting
things
to
I
become
never
friends with an
expected that
artist
kind
you
of
yeah, you look up to or whatever.
situation.
It's
Yeah, and
it's a very, very similar thing, and, like, that stuff
yeah,
is that,
well,
I've
it's not
I've
that.
met some other
I mean,
pedal
it's yeah,
builders that, like, have definitely been very complimentary, and
yeah,
I'm just left being like, "How do you even know who I am? Like, why do you know who I am? I buy your
yeah,
pedals. I
yeah.
love your pedals. You don't know who I am. That's not
I
how
love
this
your thing.
works."
You don't know me. I love
Yeah,
your thing.
yeah, exactly.
Um, no, yeah, and my example is it's a minute, small, ridiculous social media interaction, but like even something as small as that, is just like, so like if I were to be in the position where it's something like, you know, uh I don't know what the situation would be. Like, oh, I see Kirk Hammett posting he read Evie and the Helsings and he loved it. Like, I'd be like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
what? Like,
yeah.
because he's and obviously because I love Metallica and he's a horror guy or whatever. And if and it is my one secret dumb dream to have him on the show. And if I ever get him on the show, I'll just end it after that and just be
That'd be
done.
awesome. Hell yeah.
If I make it, it's either that or I make it to show 666 and then I just end it. It's just done. And then the show
Yeah,
is done.
that
Uh,
both are worth ending afterwards. Yeah, I'm with you.
but it's again, I loved hearing that your pedals are getting that wide, and I'm really excited to see what you do in the future with your pedals. Um, and before I hit you with a couple of final questions before we go, we do have one more question from Instagram, and that's from Seaward Music. And they would like to know: do you consider yourself the world's deadliest menace to clean tones?
No, no, I don't. I appreciate that, but um,
You're a
I
friend to
mean,
clean tones. Give them a break.
yeah, no. There's very specifically, like somebody says something like that, and very specifically, my brain always goes to this company, Death by Audio, who
Hmm.
they're huge as an inspirational company for me. Oliver, who runs that company, is an inspirational person for me. For I've talked about him a lot. You know, I love his band, I love his company, but Death by Audio will make a pedal that will make you wonder if the pedal is broken. And if somebody is going to be like the menace to clean tones, it's going to be Death by Audio without
Yeah,
question.
yeah,
It's not going to be me. It's going to be them.
yeah.
I
Me not
appreciate it,
even
but yeah,
yeah. Me not even really being a pedal guy. I know Death by Audio, and
yeah,
yeah, they, they're
yeah.
they got some just nasty fun things. If I had all the expendable income to just build board after board, they'd just be littered with
Yeah,
insanity.
when I started when the slow lore started doing well, every like successful release day, I would basically like treat myself to a Death by Audio pedal that I wanted
Nice.
because like I had a bunch, I have a bunch, but at the time there were just so many of these old ones that I wanted, and they weren't like huge priorities. So it's like when
Yeah.
I had that little bit of expendable money, I was like, all right, I'm gonna pick up this one. Oh, I've always wanted this one. I'm gonna pick that one up, and like now my Death by Audio collection is vast. There's, there's
Yeah, they got they
dude,
I'm trying to look up real quick because there's one
I have
I was really just like in love with recent. I think it was the Destroyer pedal. I think that was the one I was just like
which one?
the Destroyer.
Oh, the Waveformer Destroyer,
Um
the big red and black one.
yeah.
Yeah, I had that one. I had that one for a little while. I should re-get that one for the collection. I did get rid of it at one point, but yeah, that one's fun. Yeah,
And yeah, dude, yeah, it's just the pedal thing is like I get it. Like, if it's just like, vinyl or collecting books or guitar. It's just
or
it's
guitars. Yeah,
yeah, it's these things that are just really neat and just have their own character, and the mixing and matching and just figuring things out and all that.
yeah.
Um,
It's like a
the last
giant
couple of questions,
sonic puzzle.
the last couple of questions I want to hit you up with
Sure.
before we go is I know you're working on some new stuff. You can't really talk about it because it's not a thing yet. You're is there like a certain type of pedal that maybe you're not working on now, but you're like, oh, I'd really like to figure out how to do something like this? Um, because I don't know what like the difficulty is like making something that has like an octaver in it.
Right.
I don't know if that's something that has to incorporate a digital component, um,
To do
or
it
if
well.
there's
Yeah, kind of.
yeah,
Yeah.
because usually when I think of fuzzes, I think of like something that has an octaver component to it,
Mhm.
and all that. And I love fuzzes, and I could definitely see myself in 10 years having like 10, 15 different fuzz pedals at that
Right.
point, and just uh, enjoying all that. But or like you have the slowers, which is a delay and all that. But is there like a realm or like a tonality of pedal that you're just kind of like thinking about, like how would I approach this?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Reverb.
Okay.
Um, like my challenge to myself is that like I don't really have any desire to do anything that anybody's already done,
Hmm.
which is difficult. It's a difficult proposition. Um,
Yeah.
but what that boils down to is like obviously there's a million reverb pedals out there and there's a million great reverb pedals out there, but like what would I want to do that I can't get from
Hmm.
anything else? That's the challenge to myself there. Um, because there are so many great ones that like when I want one, I can take one off the shelf that I already own and it'll do what I need it to do. So if that already exists, I don't need to make it.
Yeah.
Um, so things like the distortion I have coming out or the slow loris or some of the fuzzes, like they do a thing that I couldn't get from anything else, and that's why I made them. Um, I don't have that idea for reverb yet, but
Okay.
I would love to because I would love to have my own reverb on my board, but I don't. I just don't know what that is yet. Because I haven't gotten to a point where I've thought like, oh, I would be really great if I had a reverb that did this, and I didn't have that as an option already. You know.
Yeah.
Um, so yes, that is like the one avenue that I definitely still really want to go down, but
Hmm.
I just don't know what my reverb pedal would be yet.
Yeah, reverb is one of those effects that I never really cared for myself until I got I started experimenting with the Neural DSP Gojira suite. And
Hmm.
the reverb they have on there has like a shimmer
Hmm.
mode. I don't know what the hell it does, but for some reason that shimmer like just adds like that extra kind of just like weird funkiness to it where like I really just sometimes I just find myself just fucking around with that and like different either fuzz plugins or the fuzz pedals I have on my board or whatever and that and just messing around with that. But I'm willing to bet you'll find your reverb muse, and I'm sure it's going to be just absolutely killer.
We'll see.
Um,
I hope so, but I'm in no rush. I'll get there.
I mean, Slow Loris has not dominated the world quite yet, so um, and honestly, like a lot of my daily video consumption is music YouTube stuff,
Hmm.
and I every day that I think of it, like I when I load up my subscriptions or whatever, I will never be I won't be surprised if I see like one of these like mega huge channels with a slow loris on there. Like one of the ones I watch on the regular, which are predominantly more in the harder edge of music. So the slow loris doesn't exactly follow into there. It's mostly overdrives and
Yeah, yeah.
fuzzes that get featured there. But I'm waiting for like 60 cycle hum to talk about the slow loris or something like that uh,
Uh,
or not.
I
I don't
mean, that
know.
would be cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing about 60 cycle hum and no shade to that guy, he seems real cool. He's got a good channel. From what I understand, to get him to review one of your products, it is very expensive.
Okay. I understand.
So
I get it. Like
yeah,
it's
so I'm probably not anytime soon.
no, that's well, and considering like his like when usually when I see him do pedals too, they're either like really like they're bigger brand pedals or they're
Yeah,
like the affordable boards he does where it's like the $20
right.
team board whatever
And that
you
stuff's
can
just obviously all passion project for him. He's not getting paid for those. So
yeah, so it's just but something like that, like I wouldn't be surprised if like again like I music is win has a slow loris video one day or whatever. um
yeah, I mean,
but
it showed up on a rig rundown
it
for
did,
somebody that
yeah.
I know didn't buy it from me. So I who
Hey,
knows? It could happen.
well, long story short, like I think this all the success it's getting is deserved. Though I don't own one, I don't know if I would ever have one for myself. I do like the sound of it. I think it sounds great. I've heard plenty of delay pedals. It sounds like its own thing, and I'm glad it's found an audience. I'm glad it's continuing to grow, and I'm glad non-human audio is continuing to grow. Um, I love seeing my friends win, no matter what. And so I just leave my final question, which has nothing to do with guitar pedals, and that is, when am I getting Volk 2?
Ah, man.
For anyone who may not know, Dave a few years ago put out an homage to like Kirby
Yeah.
esque, Thor space stuff called Volk, and I really enjoyed it. And I know Dave's muse, our creative muse, has shifted a bit from making comics to
Yeah.
making the pedals and music, and doing more music and all that. But I have to ask: it is comics a
So
coffee
I will say that, like, I mean, I'm sure I probably told you about it at some point, but I had like a pretty big plan
metal? Yeah.
for all that. Um, and at a certain point, I did consider, and it's not off the table. There are still occasional discussions about comics projects
Hmm.
that might happen at some point with various people who shall not be named. The likelihood of them panning out is very slim, but um, so at one point I was talking to somebody about um, drawing the Mitts follow up
Okay.
for me because it's written. It's
Yeah.
it's written. It's uh, thumbnailed. I just never got like
Hmm.
I just never started penciling it. You know. Um, so I did consider that with Volk too. The follow up isn't written, but I have like I've always kind of had the idea of what like the next one would be.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would love to. If I could if I had the time to like um write and have people draw because I don't have the time to draw comics anymore. I just don't.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a
you
thing.
know, I might be able to manage a couple of pages here and there, but like I don't have the time to like produce like I used to. So you know, if I had the time to write it and get somebody to draw it, I would love to. But the flip side to that is that if it materialize, I don't have the time to promote it. I just don't. Like I don't
Mm.
have the time to go to comic conventions anymore. I don't like
No,
I
yeah,
don't have
it's
I have my own business to run now. like I don't
yeah,
have the time to like also be pushing comics.
yeah.
like I
We,
wonder about that. Oh, hold on
you
one
don't
second.
have the time to invest to push the lucrative world of independent comics.
I just like so I wonder about that because like I have a sizable Instagram following that at least some of them were there for uh comics and art,
Yeah.
because they're how many of those people still follow me? I don't know, but probably a good amount. And I just wonder if sometimes somebody will like log in and be like, how come this guy doesn't draw anything anymore? And I still do like every once in a while, like I've done some of those logos for like Brad Brooks's company, the
Yeah.
Dumb Stuff Done Well,
Yeah.
the Whatever Forever hats and the consume content shirts. And so I'm still doing logos here and there. But like, I obviously it's like, it's those projects are so few and far between.
Hmm.
Um, I would love to. I still got a couple of boxes of that book sitting around. so, you
Yeah,
know,
I just had to ask just because I was a fan of it, and
that's
obviously
fair.
I
I
enjoyed
appreciate
all the
that.
comics and stuff
That
you've
book was
done.
a real labor of love for me. It took a long
Yeah,
time to finish uh, because I was working on it like when I got divorced and everything.
yeah,
And so I, just finishing that book and getting it out always felt like a really like big
yeah.
accomplishment for me. So yeah,
No,
I'm
yeah, and
glad the people that got to read it did like it.
yeah, and I was aware of like the difficulties you had getting finishing and all this life stuff that was happening, and
Yeah.
yeah, I had a similar experience for myself with one of my issues, and I knew the relief when it was done.
Yeah.
Like I did this through this thing.
Mhm.
and it's done, and you kind of just felt a little, you just felt that just that bit better about a situation you probably weren't too thrilled about. You know,
Yeah. I
either
mean,
either
you
either
wanna
it
hear
was,
even
you know,
more,
something
like,
you had to go through
maybe
or not, it was still like a thing.
yeah. The, slightly more bummer news for anybody that, like, really liked my writing and art is I have a 150-page graphic novel that's fully written and thumbnailed that I never finished. So,
Was is that the one you sent me the script for?
probably.
Was it half like half? I think it was called
Yeah,
Half Life.
Half-Lives, yeah.
Okay, okay, okay. Well, that's a bummer because it was good. The script was really good,
Thank you.
and you know, maybe
I
one
thought it was a
day,
good
you know.
script, but that one, since it did deal with so much personal stuff, like, just going through that process of processing all that
Hmm.
in that way,
Yeah,
I think was really valuable. So, like, I'm not mad I did all that work, um,
no,
but I did think that that was pretty good and had some
no,
potential.
and you
But
know, I
I don't
yeah,
I if I don't have the time to, like, draw a single comic now, I definitely don't have the time to
150
draw a
pages. Yeah.
150-page graphic novel.
Um, no, and I was gonna say like you know, knowing what that book was about and all that, and I'm glad you had the opportunity to at least get to that point to process it. You know, uh, it's been a big mental health journey for me the past few years, and I've done things like that that no one will see. But making comics or using the comic art form to try to process things has been like it's only endeared me so much more to the art form, and just, you know, I can only do the work I'm doing now because of that, I feel like. And so I'm glad that you've had that, because you can do the things you can do now because those were things you had to do. You had the process, and it's leading to something that is, you know, being a net positive for people, because making a cool fucking guitar pedal that make people make cool music with, like that's a cool that's a positive thing that spreads, and that's really awesome, and I'm glad to hear it. I uh, don't want to didn't want to bum everybody out about the end of the comic talk or whatever, but I did have to ask. I was looking forward to the Walt Simonson era of Volk,
Yeah, yeah.
if that was going to happen anyway. I think that's something you mentioned might have been
Yeah, that was gonna be the
something
second
coming.
issue. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but you know, we'll see what happens. You know,
Look,
as you said,
I can't say it'll never happen.
yeah.
It's unlikely to, but I can't say it never will.
You're just things are happening, and you're just letting them happen as they go. And
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
what? These days, like I can't argue about a better method than that. See
Yeah.
where things go
Look, if the
and just
pedal
take it step by
business
step.
totally tanks and I have time again, maybe I will. Maybe I'll just be like, "Actually, I'm gonna get back to that drawing, that whole drawing thing."
There you go. All right. Well, Dave, thanks so much for your time. Now is the place to let everybody know where they can find you on social media.
Uh, at that Dave Jordan, pretty much everywhere. I spend pretty much all my time on Instagram now, because I don't go on the site formerly known as Twitter really anymore. I am on Blue Sky, but I only post about snacks pretty much.
Oh, I
Um,
forgot to see. I'll have to have you on. Definitely have to have you on before another 4 years passes, because we even get to
we
the
didn't get to the
snack.
junk food.
Yeah, the trash snacks that you do, that I'm just like intrigued, and also just like give me instant heartburn seeing the photo.
Yeah. But yeah, at that Dave Jordan on Instagram, nonhumanaudio.com. Those are the places. Those are the places to find me.
All right, they will. Thanks again.
All right, bud.